Hello everyone, welcome to the Buzz the Prey Manga. Today we continue the latest Global Freeze chapter, rewritten and edited by me in English for a smooth reading experience. All visuals and story flow are personally edited to give you the best manga style storytelling. Support the original creator by checking the official manga. So let's dive right into the today's chapter.
Chapter 2591, Unreachable One. The space distorted the moment he clenched his fist, and he vanished from that space. He flickered in midair like a point of light, each time shifting to a distance of 5 kilometers. The lost world was vast, and it kept flashing as it moved at high speed according to the coordinates given by Liu Karen. Even he spent a long time finding that coordinate point. He had reached the vicinity of that skyline. For an ordinary person, it would just look like a needle in the distance, hidden deep in the fog, separated by the sea, the desert, and the ruins of a city. It just seems very far away. But in Zhang Yi's view, it was not as simple as just being far away. That distance was clearly artificially stretched. He took another step forward. A ring of extremely fine refraction appeared in the spatial ripples. He raised his hand and touched the refracted surface, as if touching heated glass. His fingertips were gently flicked away. It was as if an invisible spatial barrier was blocking his way. Interesting. A burning light flashed in Zhang Yi's eyes. Was it the core of a lost civilization? What secrets does that place hold? He flew forward a little bit more. But he continued forward, and no matter how he traversed space, he did not get any closer to that distant and enormous horizon. It felt like hundreds of kilometers apart, but the horizon line connected to the sky. It was a tall tower, a distant Tower of Babel. Is that the core of the entire Martian world? Zhang Yi squinted as he searched for traces of spatial folding, following the method Ling had taught him. He sensed something unusual about that area, but with his power, he was unable to get close. Imagine you're walking forward on a conveyor belt, but the conveyor belt is moving backward. The two forces collide, and in the end, you only move forward a tiny bit, like a fingernail. Zhang Yi frowned. He doesn't believe in superstitions. This time, he simply activated a high-level spatial teleportation, his entire figure completely becoming ethereal, turning into an extremely thin spatial tangent, as if he had jumped from point A to point B out of thin air. But this time, when he jumped out, the scenery in front of him was still the same. It's still that same weathered, cracked meadow land, still that abandoned mechanical city nestled among sand dunes in the distance, still that towering skyscraper that's always ahead, always out of reach. A hint of surprise finally flashed in his eyes. There is a huge spatial barrier here. Liu Karen's voice emerged from his shadow again, but this time her tone was not just excited, but also somewhat incredulous. Zhang Yi hovered in midair, subconsciously reaching out to support his chin. If the space is folded up to form an inaccessible barrier, then it will be very difficult to deal with. He didn't believe it and tried again. This time, he didn't simply fly forward. Instead, he spread out all the myriad things in the world on the spot, peeling away the layers of this space's structure, using dimensional gates to collide with spatial barriers, and attempting to open a passage through spatial annihilation. Splash. The collision of spatial forces is the most primitive and brutal method, but it does produce results. As the dimensional gate shattered, a path was forcibly carved out, creating a road several kilometers in front of him. But the space here is as if the logic was pre-written by an extremely meticulous engineer. He peeled back the first layer, and below was still this wasteland. Peel back the second layer, and it's still there. The third floor is still there. Upon reaching the fourth level, the space even recoiled slightly, pushing his myriad phenomena outward a little, and he could no longer proceed. This brute force method of breaking down the gates has already destroyed hundreds of the 3,000 dimensional gates of the myriad phenomena. Zhang Yi dared not continue his reckless actions. Based on the distance he could see, even if he destroyed all the dimensional gates, he would not be able to get close to that towering structure. Moreover, he couldn't possibly abandon his strongest defensive capabilities. Who knows what dangers might lie ahead? His gaze finally darkened. Ling. He called out softly. Ling's figure appeared silently beside him. In the presence of this high-level space, her aura became even fainter, and even the luster of her silver armor was suppressed, as if she did not want to disturb the true master of this world. After all, she is only at the level of a white knight now, not at her peak. This is their core area, she said calmly. It's not a level you can directly enter. Zhang Yi glanced at her sideways and raised an eyebrow. Didn't you just say that I should find the passage myself? You've found it, but finding it doesn't mean you can get inside. Ling's eyes were very serious, as if she was giving him a lesson. Judging from their mastery of space, this civilization is extremely advanced. At its peak, it was perhaps second only to the Aihen race in terms of civilization level. She suddenly frowned. But why didn't we see them during the previous war to wipe out the Druckers? If they hadn't encountered the Druckers, how could they have perished? Zhang Yi crossed his arms and slowly exhaled. These guys are much more cautious than the civilizations on Earth. I admire them quite a bit. If they didn't perish due to external interference, then it must have been due to internal reasons. Ling looked at the towering structure in the distance, a tower that could never be reached, and a faint trace of nostalgia flashed in her eyes. They knew what would really be broken, so they hid the truly precious things. Zhang Yi didn't respond to that, but continued to test the space. This time he was more direct and forceful, drawing out the demon blade divine refinement and slashing the blade forward. The black blade flashed, tearing through the air as if it were trying to shave off a section of the elongated space in front of it. But when the blade struck, the space was pressed down like water, leaving a deep crease. Then, countless tiny geometric patterns of light lit up all around, bouncing back the section that had been pressed down. It's like you stabbed a piece of highly resilient rubber. The rubber will automatically patch the hole. This is getting a bit annoying. Zhang Yi said in a low voice, his voice carrying a hint of impatience for the first time. Not to others, but to this space. Using a spatial system to dismantle space, only to find out that you're fighting against an advanced civilization that's patching up the universe, is indeed quite annoying. Lu Karen shrank her shoulders in his shadow, wanting to laugh but not daring to, and could only hold it in. She couldn't help but say, Brother Zhang Yi, how about instead of forcibly demolishing it, let's take another route. For example, by using its legal entrance. She pointed to the abandoned cities in the distance. Such a big world must have transportation hubs, access towers, and mainframe rooms. You're standing outside trying to smash the server's shell with a hammer. Of course you can't break it. If you could find its local login node, maybe you could get into that layer. Chapter 2592, Unreachable 2. That sounds reasonable. Zhang Yi nodded, but his face showed a helpless smile. But there's a problem. How do we get through the main entrance? Zhang Yi opened his mask and rubbed his temples vigorously. We're exploring an entire world. It's not that kind of primitive civilization, which we can understand roughly by scanning it with technological means. This is still an advanced civilization. We can't understand many of their technologies. Zhang Yi felt a headache starting to ache. He felt as if he were standing in front of a mountain of gold, but all around him was a vast, boundless desert. He had no tools and could only gaze at the gold without being able to dig it out. It truly feels like being torn apart by 100 claws. Lu Karen comforted him, saying, Brother, let our engineering troops explore here slowly. It will take several decades, and we will eventually make a breakthrough. Thank you. You're so good at comforting people. Zhang Yi's eye twitched involuntarily. However, he also knew that Lu Karen was right. Excavating advanced civilizations was not so easy. They might need to make breakthroughs at the technical level for a very long time at any given juncture. Zhang Yi turned to Ling again. Ling-chan, as the masterpiece of the most advanced civilization in the universe, you must have a way, right? Ling countered, if you can operate a mobile phone skillfully, then do you know how to make money? Zhang Yi. Ling continued, there must be a way to open the spatial barrier. If we can't force it open with more powerful spatial forces, then we must find the key. However, nobody knows where the key is. For a moment, Zhang Yi and his team were at a stalemate. Zhang Yi was still figuring out how to challenge this Tower of Babel when a soft melody suddenly drifted into his ears. The piece was classical and gentle, yet it didn't sound like a pure piano. The tone had a hint of metallic resonance, as if someone were tapping glass strings with brass knuckles. Zhang Yi and the others immediately showed expressions of astonishment. Because the melody was very familiar, I don't know if the musical scales of all races are the same, but this music is clearly in the style of humans. How could Earthling music be playing here? The sound came at just the right time, as if an old friend was waiting for their arrival. Zhang Yi immediately instructed the intelligence system to locate the source of the sound, and then cautiously activated the spatial teleportation to rush in that direction. The sound came from a cluster of collapsed high-rise buildings. It was a city skeleton flattened by time, the walls as if they had been peeled off, leaving only steel bars and inner ribs, appearing pale and alienated in the constant white light of this other world. The sound came from the highest beam, echoing slightly, and spread over the ruins towards the sea. When Zhang Yi arrived here, he could hear the sound with his ears alone, without the aid of smart devices. Zhou Kur listened for a few seconds, her eyes lit up, and the corners of her mouth turned up. This is Schubert's Serenade. As she said this, she couldn't help but hum along softly, looking at Zhang Yi as if showing off her ability to read music. I never thought that someone in this godforsaken place would understand romance. Zhang Yi smiled, a hint of surprise in his eyes. The Martian Serenade has quite a unique flavor. But I can confirm that our human pioneers didn't come away empty-handed. The image of Elon Freeman flashed through his mind. Their advance team had indeed reached the depths of the Martian world. When Zhang Yi arrived at the ruins, he saw a humanoid creature sitting on a huge steel beam. Saying he was sitting was a bit of a stretch. It was more like he was sitting cross-legged. He wore an outrageously large hat with a brim so wide it almost covered half his face, and a piece of fabric on top that had collapsed, swaying gently in the wind of the Martian world. His body wasn't the streamlined, tall machine of the Tsungyuan clan, but rather had a touch of old-fashioned industrial aesthetics, rivets, exposed joints, and rough-lined chest armor, as if an old-fashioned piano and a piece of engineering machinery had been forcibly pieced together to form a humanoid figure. The strangest thing was his face. To be precise, it was the area that should have been the face, but the material was a black, slightly worn square display screen. At that moment, a person's face was lit up on that screen. It was the face of a middle-aged human male, with the angular features still intact, but his temples were much wider, his eye sockets were a bit deep, and the wrinkles at the corners of his mouth indicated that this person used to love to laugh, but now his laughter carried a slight neurotic quality. Zhang Yi glanced at him and immediately recognized who he was. Elon Freeman. He called out softly. The face on the screen seemed to freeze for a moment, then switched back to live feed with a ding, and when its gaze met Zhang Yi's, a genuine look of surprise appeared on its face. Oh my God, look what I've discovered. Damn it, is this just my imagination? The person on the electronic screen laughed. Even her voice had a slight hissing noise like an old videotape. Finally we see aliens. And they even have modern accents. He stood up abruptly, but his movements were not fluid like a human's. They were mechanical folds. The limbs first retracted, then sprang back, making a few soft click-click sounds as the joints locked in place, and the hat also shook twice. He was still in the same playing motion with his hands. That's not a piano. He disassembled each joint of his fingers into retractable metal flute holes, then used the joints as a row of keys. By pinching his 10 fingers together and twisting them, he could play chords. You've come at just the right time. I've been waiting here for many years. The mechanical version of Freeman smiles broadly, with fake wrinkles appearing at the corners of his eyes on screen, as if afraid others wouldn't notice his great happiness. Zhang Yi landed not far from him, and the steel beam beneath his feet sank slightly. He looked around and raised an eyebrow. Your outfit is quite trendy. He pointed to the excessively large hat and said, Is it that your own sense of aesthetics is flawed? Or is this the only type left on this assembly line of civilization? Freeman laughed heartily, his laughter carrying a metallic, electronically synthesized echo. Martian wind, my friend. He patted the hat, looking quite pleased with himself. There is indeed a lot of wind and sand here, but we must not lose our elegance. Besides, I don't sweat anymore, so I don't have to worry about heat dissipation when wearing a hat. After saying that, he laughed for a while, as if he thought his lame joke was quite successful. Upon seeing Freeman, Yang Xinxin and the others couldn't help but emerge from the shadows. Zhou Ke, standing beside Zhang Yi, wrinkled her nose and glanced at him. You're the leader of that pioneer team that went to Mars 20 years ago? She looked at Elon Freeman, quite surprised by his mechanical body. So you didn't die, but you did replace your body with a machine. Here ends today's chapter. I hope you liked it. Kindly do also subscribe to my gaming channel. I have to Fina a way to survive. Thanks.
Alright, that's it for today's chapter. Tell me in the comments which part you enjoyed the most. If you love manga style stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe the Buzz Play Manga. See you in the next chapter with more surprises. Thank you.